Good morning, everyone. My name is Jason Wood, and this presentation is on my paper, Divorce and Its Effect on Children. As I studied this, learned many things. One of the things I already knew, but as I studied this, I learned this even more. Divorce is so prevalent in our society, but it's also one of the most destructive elements of modern culture. And what's interesting about this, that it's prevalent and it's also destructive. But what's interesting is how modern culture almost celebrates divorce and the freedom of choice for a parent to do what they feel like is best for them, while many times ignoring the destructive elements that divorce has on children and our society at large. And one of the reasons that I even wanted to write this paper is because I am personally a child of divorce, and I have personally felt the effects of seeing my parents divorce, of seeing my father, in a sense, leave our family for a new thing. And what that has done to my life, not just for a few months or for a few years, but for decades, and the effects that I still have in my life today that I have to deal with. And so it is very real to me personally. And so as I think about divorce, it's a very personal thing for me. But as I studied this, divorce and its effects many times can be hard to quantify, because it's not like, you go from, having a temperature of 96, temperature of 99 after a divorce. The effects of the scars, the trauma, can be hard to quantify into black and white things. But there is no debate from counselors, from sociologists, from even pastors, that divorce has long and lasting effects and honestly scars for children. Three main common scars that you see in children who've been a child of divorce. The first is anger, that they are angry that something is just wrong in their life, that they know something is off, something is not right, and it leads to a sense of anger, but also leads to a natural sense of loss, where a child has lost something very significant in their life. We are wired and made for a mother and a father. And when one of those taken out of the home, it's the natural consequence is a sense of deep loss from that parent. And the last kind of main major scar is a real sense of abandonment in a child's life, where they feel like, as once again, we are wired to be cared for by our parents. And when a parent steps out of the home, the most natural thing in the world for a child to feel is abandonment and a sense of loss and, of course, anger. Now, there are some black and white things that you can see. There are stats that are in my paper that show that children on divorce, on average, have lower academic scores. That a child with two parents and a child in divorce, you can see very clearly that their academic scores drop on average. Another thing you see is that in the future, for children of divorce, they have a lower on average earning power. That the effects of divorce are so far reaching that it affects, of course, their academics, which then, of course, affects where a kid goes to school or doesn't go to school for college, which then, of course, then affects their earning power. Because when there's, of course, as we know, lower education and lower a ceiling there, it lowers the effect and the ability that somebody has to earn in their future. And the last thing that you see in stat that I read was that it affects a lower quality of life on relationships going forward for a child of divorce. That on average, a child of divorce can then lead to walking in divorce in their future marriage as well, or strained relationships with other coworkers, friends, or even their own children one day. And, probably the biggest consequence of divorce is that divorce always damages and affects the relationship between a parent and a child. Doesn't mean it can't be repaired, doesn't mean that you can't fix things, but there's always some sense of something there with a child of divorce. So in short, as you see the effects of this, divorce can severely hurt children and their long-term future hopes and plans and relationships. So divorce has real consequences in a child's life. But that's not to say that people are hopeless that are children of divorce. I don't feel like I'm hopeless as a child of divorce. So there are ways to take steps for healing and restoration for the parent, for the child, and for their future. The first step for a counselor or a pastor or even a friend is to identify the level of trauma and the consequences of the divorce in a child's life. That as we sit down with a child after a parent has left or they've divorced, we have to identify what is the level of trauma, of loss, of abandonment, of anger in this child's life. Because before we can really diagnose and remedy the problem, we have to kind of see how severe this is. Just like when you go to a doctor, they have to check and see how severe is the broken bone or how severe is the heart issues. We must diagnose correctly the severity of the issue before we can truly address and move forward. The next step is then to work with the parents, to not see the counselor or the pastor or the friend as the caretaker or the hero or the one that is healing, but then to help the parents be the healing agent in a child's life, to teach the parents the things they can do to reconcile and restore relationship and to set their child up for a healthy and bright and great future. And so this is very important for a counselor to do because we want to make sure that that relationship between a parent and a child is healed in the midst of divorce. And as that is healed, many of the other things that we see are kind of can be healed as we heal our relationship with the parent and child. And finally, we must remind the child of the hope of the gospel. Remind the child, remind the parent that as we see in Romans 8:28, God can work all things together for the good of those who love them. Now, we don't say this flippantly. We don't ignore their pain. We don't do any of those things. But after everything is put out there, it is said, and it is done, we have to give them hope. Because we can look at stats all day, we can look at all these things, and we can be discouraged and hurt. When we set our mind on things above and encourage others to set their mind on things above, that God is present, that God is near, that God is not taken surprised by this, but that He is there, He is present, He is loving, He can heal, He can restore, and to teach us and everyone as we're going through any kind of difficulty to put our hope and our faith and our trust in Him. Thank you guys for listening to my presentation today. Hope it was helpful and encouraging.